Hi, everybody. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina at the beautiful Sierra Nevada Brewery. Now, before we dive into today's interview, please pop a comment in there and let me know what you think about the interview and Dr. Bamforth and all the great things. Oh, my God. Well, we're at Sierra Nevada Brewery, and here comes the Brewmaster, Scott. My gosh,
Hi.
Scott Jennings. Look at this.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Oh, what have you got there?
Oh, I brought
That-
some beer. There we are.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. What we got, Scott?
Yes.
Well,
Well, cheers.
first of all.
Cheers. You're very good health.
Wow.
Cheers. This is Weizenbach.
Ah, I can smell it.
Yeah, right.
Oh, my word.
Probably could smell it as I walked into the room.
Oh, my word. God. So I'm getting the banana, the esters. I'm getting the clove. And the alcohol by volume on this?
8%.
8%. We're going to have a good chat today. You're hiding your light under a bushel here. You're being modest because you got an award for this.
Yeah. We just got the
His son got an award.
Yeah. Somebody got an award for it.
World Beer Cup Gold in Weizenbach.
My word, yes.
For this beer right here.
Yeah, and that would not surprise me.
Well, you must be one proud brewmaster and proud papa.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
There's not many people that can claim that. That is awesome.
Wow, let's go.
So if we want one, you've got to come to Mills River or Asheville, North Carolina, and get your Weizenbachs, and maybe you'll see Scott there in the tap room.
If you do, say hi.
Cheers, Scott. That is
Cheers.
awesome. And again, pass along my congratulations to Henry. That's awesome. Well, Charlie Bamforth needs a little introduction, but for those of you that might be a little unfamiliar with his, I guess you'd call it pedigree, he is, in my opinion, a legend in the brewing industry, a man they call the Popophone. And Charlie's expertise in malting and brewing is frankly unparalleled in the industry. And his influence in the world of beer is just phenomenal. It's rare that I don't, when I talk to somebody and they say I've had a beer with Charlie Bamforth, they almost always have a Charlie story. So, and that brings me to this, Charlie. We're at Sierra Nevada, and of course you've been a professor for much longer than you have been here.
Mm-hmm.
What possessed you to go work with a commercial brewery, much less why did you pick Sierra Nevada?
I didn't pick them, they picked me. But I've been in the brewing industry since 1978, Doug. And the first 20 years or so in England, and then the UK, and then at UC Davis. And I retired, and Ken Grossman said, hey, come up to Chico, have a beer. So I went up to Chico, and he said, so you're retiring, what are you going to do now? I said, I'm retiring. He said, no, you're not. No, you're not. And he said, you're coming to spend time with us. And in all honesty, Doug, I would have not said yes to anybody else. I genuinely would not. And I have great respect, enormous respect for lots of people in the brewing industry. But Ken is special.
Well, and I know you know how to say no, because actually I contacted you right after you retired, and you said, not now.
You know, Ken has various reasons. He's done more, I think, for the North American brewing industry than anybody. And that expands globally.
Yeah.
And he did a lot for UC Davis in various ways. But everything he did is all about quality and all about responsibility and all about people and so on. I couldn't turn him down. I just couldn't turn him down. And thank God I didn't. And this is my 5th year advising them. I'm not employed by Sierra Nevada. I'm not on the payroll directly. I'm a contractor, and my role is to give views and so on. And I remember saying to him, Ken, you know, you want me to advise on quality? What the heck am I going to tell you? You don't know already. Because the whole ethos of Sierra Nevada Brewing Company is quality.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, we want the best. We want to stay the best, and we like to involve people to make sure that we don't fall away from that. And So I'm so proud to be involved in advising Sierra Nevada, and interacting with people like Scott Jennings and so many other people they're the best. They really are the best. And I say that, genuinely, because there are many great people in the brewing industry, and I'm friends with so many all over the globe. But there's that little bit special at Sierra Nevada.
Well, we were talking earlier, and you were saying you had a discussion with someone else, and I don't know what the question was, but you said this beer, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, was the epitome of the style.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if that's an exact quote, but it's
Something like
close. Since you're involved in quality, and Ken's recipe goes back over 40 years. Yeah. And I just find it phenomenal that he's been able to maintain a flavor profile for 40 years. And I asked the brewer at Pilsner Urquell the same question. Of course, he said yes, but he backed it up. He said grandparents and great-grandparents had all said, they did it this way. So to be able to maintain a profile through all the changes and ingredients and hops, gosh, the changes in hops in 40 years, how do they do it?
They do it because they understand. They understand the process. They understand the variations. The crop changes every year. The barley changes every year, and there's environmental effects, there's regional effects, and so on. If you know what you're doing, then you overcome that, and you keep on top of it throughout all the changes. So day by day, hour by hour, you're attending to the product, and you're understanding what it is. You're monitoring things. You're measuring things. You've got expert tasters. You're doing all of these things. So I can't say, because nobody can. If you go back 40 years, and you've got a Sierra Nevada from Pale Ale from 40 years ago, and you got one now, would they be identical? They'd be pretty damn close. Let me tell you that, because Ken and his wonderful team at Sierra Nevada know that ultimately what the expectation is, that if they open a can of beer or a beer on tap and so on, they say, I recognize it. That is Pale Ale. That is what I expect.
That's the cue I was looking for. I want to open that guy.
Okay, yeah.
Because
we're double fisting right now.
Yeah, that's right. We're at the brewery. That's what you do.
We can do that thing.
So what always amazes me is the fresh hop aromatics.
Yeah, and it's Cascade hops. So
look at that beautiful beer.
This is still the same hop that Ken brought into this years ago. And of course, if you talk to Ken, he'll tell you, this beer style was fashioned on the English Pale Ale. But I can tell you, and Ken knows full well, that this is bigger and bolder than an English Pale Ale. There's more ABV, and there's much more hop character in a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And you got to cast your mind back all those years ago. And what the North American beer drinker was used to was excellent beers, but fairly gently flavored. Yeah. So what Ken, he really...
I've heard IBUs were as low as like 10 or 15.
Generously. But what he did, he went out, he went big. He said, I'm making, he was making a statement. Here's a beer, which is, bold. This is a completely a step apart from what you're used to drinking.
You know what
he
told
me
to
do that
in an earlier discussion? He said, Doug, I wanted to create an American flavor. Wow.
But you got to remember also,
that's gutsy.
He had to make his own brewery.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy a catalog and say, I'll buy that Lauterton. But he had to make his own. He drilled all the holes in the bottom of his first Lauterton to make his first Lauterton. I mean, it's astonishing. And then he studied, and he studied by night, and he enrolled in all the classes at Butte College where he could get the tools to and then he'd brew his beer, And then he'd walk the streets of Chico and say, this is my beer.
I heard it was 85 cents a bottle when it first came out, which was more than double what the other beers were at the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really gutsy. Well,
but it's more than double the flavor.
Yeah. And so how do you scale up production? I mean, you're a production guy, you understand it, but he took what's in effect a homebrew recipe that is a completely new style. I mean, he didn't clone any. I guess you could sort of say it was based on, what was being done in Europe.
Well, the principles of making a pale ale, he applied those.
Yeah.
But he built it up. He built it up. So it was very different to what he would expect in England. And when I first came to this country and I tasted these beers, I said, Ken, these are about as hoppy as I can take them. And he said, Charlie, 25 years ago, I was brewing in a bucket. Can I leave it alone? Yeah, leave it alone, Ken.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. He's brewing in a bucket. How do you scale that up and maintain it?
Because you know the science.
Yeah.
You know the
You're back to that quality.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So he knew, if I do this and change this scale, things are going to be different. Like we were talking about earlier on with the Weizenbock, to get a certain flavor, you can use this type of fermenter, but you can't use that type of fermenter. Ken worked out all that. He worked it out himself. He didn't go to university, he didn't study at UC Davis. He did all the reading. He worked it up for himself and worked out how to do it. Absolutely single-mindedly and dedicated to getting it right. And, his first beer was actually not pale ale. The first beer he was going to go commercially with was a porter. And he poured away the first, I think it was 6 batches. It wasn't to his satisfaction. He thought, I can't make that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to put that out. So he basically poured it away until he got a batch that was what he wanted. Now,
and he didn't have the money to pour it away, is my understanding. No. I see a lot of things that go on at this brewery that I don't see in many other breweries. And I know you've been to a ton of breweries.
Yeah.
Can you point out what some of those things are?
In fairness to many brewers, they do strive to do the best.
Mm-hmm.
But at Sierra Nevada, it's obligatory. It's obligatory. You have to have the best practices. You have to strive to always be consistent, to have your consistent processes. You've got to monitor raw materials. You've got to have an intense, close relationship with suppliers or the maltsters, the hop people, and so on. You've got to work at those relationships. You've got to work at the relationships with the customers. It's all about people. People are at the heart of everything. And that's one of the roles I perform in terms of development and training. And I spend a lot of time doing that because, you're going to have new people coming in all the time. And so people, Doug, years ago, I was with the Bass Brewing Company in the UK, and I was a research manager. And the managing director of Bass Brewers said to me, Charlie, there are 2 things that matter in this company. The first is quality. The second is people. And if you look after the people, they will deliver the quality. And Ken knows that. He understands that, and he believes in it. But just look at the 2 breweries, Chico and Mills River. They speak quality, everything about. I've been in breweries, like you said, Doug, all over the world, and they're not all that clean sometimes. And they're a bit messy, and and they're loving people, they're lovely people, and they do their best and so on. But if you don't have a beautiful working environment, the risk is that people, they get a little bit careless and so on. But everything has got to look right in Sierra Nevada. It's got to be right. It's got to be right.
Well, let's go a little beyond that, because there's a lot of things that I see when I pull in here. The parking lot has certain stones and gravel so they can collect the rainwater. There's solar panels all over. I understand that he reclaims all the CO2 so they don't have to buy CO2. I understand the water treatment plant is like one of the best around, and the building is LEED's platinum, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think it's the first brewery ever to be LEED's platinum.
I shouldn't say this. No, the first brewery that was LEED platinum was the UC Davis pilot brewery. But I'm just
that counts.
I just throw that in there. But you know, when Mills River was first built, my understanding is the very first, when they were, it was literally just a site. I believe the first thing they did was to employ entomologists.
Yeah.
To look at the wildlife, you know, the insect life and so on, and to understand it, so that at all stages they wanted to make sure they were not jeopardizing the environment. I mean, that's remarkable.
Well, it's just
utterly remarkable.
It's a phenomenal investment. And the water, I understand one of the reasons that Asheville was selected was phenomenal water. And of course, the biggest part of beer is water. But I'm real interested. California water is quite a bit different than Asheville water. And I bet water has been I'm just guessing, some of the things that you've had to work on. How do they work that out between
Not me. That's not one of the topics that I've been involved in terms of matching Sierra Nevada and Chico.
Mm-hmm.
But it's absolutely right. When you realize that apart from some of the crazy beers, you know, the 55% alcohol beers, and so for most beers, water is the main component.
Mm-hmm.
And not only is it the water is going to influence the final quality of the beer, but it's also going to influence the process and so on and so forth. So what you have to do, if you really want to achieve matching, you want to produce, say it's pale ale in two different breweries, opposite sides of the country, you've got to adjust the water supply. And you've got to, you either take salts out or you add salts in to make sure that you are matching that ionic composition. You know, I jokingly say, you know, there's some people who celebrate their beer and they boast the water. Let's not name any names, but up in Rocky Mountain and so on. But, you know, and I say, look, I can make you Rocky Mountain water. I can make it for you. And you can adjust water literally by taking stuff out or putting things in. And that's just one of the examples of the attention to detail. If you do want to make sure you get the same product. I mean, Ken Grossman would have decided to build a brewery on the eastern side of the country for two reasons. And the first is because it really doesn't make sense to ship beer thousands of miles. It's not good for quality. And Ken's all about quality. And the second thing is, you know, you want to make sure you're satisfying the local people with the freshest beer you can possibly get. And again, that comes down to quality. Sierra Nevada they believe that the customer, no matter where they are in the world, should have the privilege of tasting their beer as close as possible to the flavor when it was brewed. You know? So, for example, they ship the beer refrigerated. And you know, I say to people that the two keys to having fresh beer are the lowest possible oxygen in the final package and keep it as cold as possible. There's not many brewers ship their beer refrigerated across the globe, but Sierra Nevada do. And that's because they believe in doing it right. And they believe in the customer getting the beer that they want them to taste.
So I got to ask this one, though, because I've really begun to appreciate Celebration Ale. My visits to Sierra Nevada and the stories behind it and what it takes to produce it, it varies year to year. There's a flavor profile that's different. You'll have people say, oh, I liked, you know, last year's better than I do this year. So obviously, at least in people's minds, there is some change. Yet, pale ale, you never get one and go, oh, golly, that was different.
No.
How do you get that kind of consistency? That just blows my mind.
Because you pay attention to the detail on the raw materials.
Yeah.
You have specifications for them.
Yeah.
And you work with the supplier. Let's say it's malt. The maltster will have an intimate relationship with Sierra Nevada. and other brewing companies, but they will have an intimate relationship. So they know what Sierra Nevada expects from their malt. So the barley will, every season it will be different. Depends on how much water there's been, how the temperature, all those things. And global warming is going to be an issue here. But so they can adjust their malting process to hit something like the specifications that a company like Sierra Nevada expect. And the same thing applies to other raw materials as well. And then people like Scott Jennings and other brewers here, they know what they need to do to adjust whatever they need to adjust to hit specifications. So all the way through the process, there are specifications, there are targets, there are standard operating procedures, such that this is the way you do it. This is the way we do it. You do this, you do that, you do that, and so it's all specified and documented, so that you can tweak as necessary, but you have a standard way of doing things to arrive at that specific product every time. And it's tremendously skilled, but very important.
You've worked in a lot of breweries.
Yeah.
And my understanding is Pale Ale was ultimately what Ken started his brewery. He wanted it to be his flagship beer. He told me he wanted an American flavor. He found the yeast he wanted to use, selected it off of slants, experimented with it. Same thing with the hops. My understanding is he personally picked the first hops from a baby field of Cascades, right?
Cascade, yeah.
And here we are 40, 50, I don't think it's quite 50 years, but approaching that. And he's brewing what you mentioned as one of the standards in the industry, essentially following the same recipe as a young man, creating a brewery when at times all the breweries were going out of business. How many beers are like that in the world? To me, that's just phenomenal.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Pale Ale was a success story thanks to that single-minded dedication.
Yeah.
And it's a true success story, and it's grown and grown and grown. And Ken believes he's got some very traditional views. This is the right way to do things, and this is the wrong way to do things. I know full well that there are certain ways you could enhance the process, you can change the process, and do things differently to make things cheaper or so on. But Ken will only consider change if it really manifestly will be to the benefit of the consumer. And he won't take shortcuts. He's got certain principles, certain things that are non-negotiable. So I'm an advisor, and Ken said to me right at the start, he said, you need to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And there's certain topics I know I wouldn't even suggest them.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to take them on board. A classic example would be the whole cone hops. Ken is committed to the whole cone hop because he believes if you modify the hop, if you process the hop in any way, you take away something from it. And so I know full well I can't say to him, hey, you should go over to pellets or extracts tomorrow, because I don't.
But how many breweries have you been into that are still using whole cone hops?
Not many.
That's the old way.
Not many. I mean, I'm sure my friends at Anheuser-Busch will not mind me pointing out that when I first came to UC Davis in 1999, they were still using whole cone hops, but not any longer.
And that's been how many years ago?
So that was 1999. So that's 25 years ago.
And Ken's still using them. Won't change.
No, he won't. And I think, I'm not sure I should tell you this story, but I
go for it. Have another beer.
2 beers. I was, years ago in the UK. I took a group of younger scientists up to a location, which shall remain nameless, and they gave us some beer to bring back on the train. And we left it on the train. We couldn't drink it. And this, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And it's totally unheard of, you know. And it was beer that was made with a lot of hop extracts, particularly aroma extracts. And it just wasn't drinkable. It just wasn't drinkable. And I have no scientific basis for telling you, well, this is the reason, you know. But it's probably all about balance, you know. And the great beers are the balanced beers. I got two great balanced beers in front of me here. You know, the pale ale, beautiful balance between the malt and the hop. And of course, this Weizenbock is just so the beautifully balanced beers, and that is the secret to making a great beer. You're not going to have something obliterating the rest. You're going to have a big nose and a thin flavor. You know.
When I first got into home brewing, and they said, "Oh, bottle condition. That way you don't have to buy a CO2 tank. You don't have to do all this stuff." And so that was kind of an easy way to carbonate your beer. But Sierra Nevada, bottle conditions or can conditions, as in the case of this, a lot of their flagship beers, but they don't do it because it's a cheat code like a home brewer would do it. Why do they still bottle condition? I just find that phenomenal.
Yeah, well, I can't answer the question which beers are bottle conditioned or can conditioned.
But this one
not.
is.
Pale ale certainly is.
Yep.
And again, Ken is convinced that if you introduce carbonation naturally in that way, it is superior carbonation to if you basically inject CO2. And, you know, I think he has asked me in the past, well, why is that, Charlie? And I can't answer that question. I don't know. I've got a few theories about why it might be. And indeed, I published wrote a paper not too long ago with the word provocation in the paper, all about something that you and I have talked about before, which is this, you know, the way in which Pilsners are made over a long period of time. And in there, I do present a hypothesis of why CO2 generated over a period of time naturally gives a different quality of carbonation. And a colleague of mine, a long-standing collaborator of mine in Japan, he's looking at it right now. So perhaps in the future, I might have an answer to that. But the bottom line is nothing in Sierra Nevada is done because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
It's done because it is perceived as being superior. Okay. And so Ken, there's, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it was good enough for pale ale at the start, it's good enough for it now.
And I heard it's not for lack of trying. I know he told me, we were talking about Celebration Ale, and he said they tried Celebration Ale that was not bottle conditioned, and it was not the same, and therefore went back to bottle condition.
Yeah, and so be it. So be it. You know, Ken used to come to talk to my class at UC Davis 3 times every year. I taught this class, huge class, 3 times a year. And, you know, the top man, Sierra Nevada, in person, used to come down 3 times a year to Davis to talk to the class. It was like, I mean, a rock star. I mean, rock star.
He is.
350 students there just hanging on every word. And he used to present how it was, and all these pictures of how it was and how it is. And he used to present a picture of how you fill the bottles and leave the cartons open. And some of them would explode, some of them, because he hadn't got it perfectly right. You know? And then once he'd given it time for the ones that were okay, then he would fill them up, seal them up. And the door wasn't wide enough for a pallet to go through, because he never envisaged filling a pallet full of beer. You know? I mean, remarkable. I mean, just, and every time he came, there was something new that I'd never heard before, something new development that they put in. But any new development had to be right, has to be right.
So Charlie, you're making a difference here at Sierra Nevada. I'm sure.
I hope I am.
What do you think the legacy of Sierra Nevada is going to be in years from now when they look back on this, and hopefully it's continued to grow and do fantastically? What do you think their legacy is going to be?
Well, the legacy is that if you want the epitome of a quality brewing operation, how things should be done, with a commitment to the environment, a commitment to brewing excellence. In every way, they're dedicated. The family is dedicated to doing it right. I can't see anything other than Grossman's in the future. You know, when it comes to Sierra Nevada, they're steeped in this wonderful.
There's beer in their blood.
Absolutely. So, I mean, what a legacy it is. It's a commitment to doing things right. It's a commitment to caring, you know. And I don't. I mean, I'm just I'm on the periphery. I just advise as much as I can. And like I said earlier on, you know, it's very hard to actually teach somebody like Ken Grossman, Brian Grossman.
Well, it's two rock stars getting together. Y'all just have to jam.
I don't know about that. I've got another story about that if you got a minute. But you know, I'm going to tell you about quality.
Yeah.
Because it is inherent. It's the driving force. It's got to be right. It's got to be the right beer, but under the right circumstances. You know, he wouldn't go into cans for long enough until he was happy that was the right vehicle for selling beer, you know.
And now that's the majority of what they
it is, but he wouldn't do it because he wasn't convinced that
and isn't it basically now considered better than the bottles for a lot of reasons?
I'm fond of saying this because cans are better than bottles.
Yeah.
And the main reason is once you fill the can, no more oxygen is getting in there.
Yeah.
And no light is getting in there. And oxygen and light are enemies of beer. So I'm not sure if I've ever told you this story before, Doug, but my wife and I were in a restaurant in Oklahoma City one time. And it was a nice restaurant because I knew, because there's a white tablecloth. And this woman said, what would you like to drink? I said, well, what craft brews do you have? She said, I got Bud, Miller, and Coors. I said, anything else? She said, yeah, I got one more. I said, what is it? She said, Pabst Blue Ribbon. I said, I'll have one of them.
Yeah. And
it came in a can. And I went, oh. And my wife said, what's the matter with you? You tell people beer's better in a can. They brought you a can and you're moaning about it. So if you know, it's the circumstances, you know?
Yeah.
If you're in a restaurant, I mean, they don't bring you canned wine, do they?
No.
So there's this perception somehow. But the reality is the beer is better in a can than over time.
But the point is, it took Ken longer than a lot of other craft breweries until he was satisfied with the quality.
He had to be satisfied with the packaging materials because there was a material that was associated with cans that he wasn't happy with. And he wanted to have confidence that the cans that he was employing did not have that material in there. So that is the reason why.
Gosh, it's attention to detail is what I hear. But what an absolutely marvelous beer. We're going to go to the best part, which is is the rapid fire questions. And the rapid fire questions are what you have asked. What's your favorite hop and why?
Sarts from the Czech Republic, which has a great character. Years ago, I had to redesign the alcohol-free beer in the UK that my company was making, and the way we developed it, improved it, was to put some hop extract in there called Sarts. Well, alcohol-free beer is a different story. And so I rather like Sarts. And if I'm allowed to mention the beer from another company, then
they might not let us leave, but
so Singa Lager. If you ever go to Bangkok and you have a nice fresh Singa Lager, which is unless they've changed it, 100% Sarts hops, it's got a nice late hop character.
Oh,
so I'm rather fond of Sarts.
I must say I thought that might be what you'd pick, but I was really guessing by now Sierra Nevada had changed your mind.
No, not changed my mind, but there are so many wonderful things. The thing about hop varieties, and a company like Sierra Nevada, is for many of the beers, the very hoppy beers, it's not just one hop variety, it's a mixture.
Yeah.
And it's that meld. Because some of them are going to give you more piney characters, some more citrus, some more fruity, some more earthy, and so on. So it's getting that blend. So probably a better question was, which hoppy beer do you like the most?
Well, I'm going to stay in hops, but I'm going to get into their relative. So what are your thoughts on hemp beverages?
I have no thoughts.
No
hemp
thoughts.
beverages. Doug, there are some naysayers in this world that, for whatever reason, are not keen on alcohol. And there are some naysayers who are not keen on other types of materials as well. And you put the two together, and that compounds the problem in life. So I'm old-fashioned.
Okay.
So no, I just stick to more traditional brewing ingredients.
Well, you mentioned NA beers.
Yeah.
Now, I have had 2 of their NA beers. I understand there are 2 more that I have not had, and I hope that they're in the gift shop when I leave, because I want to try them. What do you think about Sierra Nevada's NA beer? Because that's hard brewing.
It is, and it's brewed in a different way to how we used to at Bass make our alcohol-free beers. We brewed a full-strength beer, and then we stripped out the alcohol with a low-temperature vacuum approach. And the problem is then you take away all the flavor. So you've got to put it back. And as I've said, some Sart's hop extracts went a very long way there. Sierra Nevada, I mean, I'm not involved in new product development in Sierra Nevada. So I have had no involvement in
But you have an opinion.
I have an opinion, and they're good.
Yeah.
They're good. And I hope it's not a state secret.
Have you tried all 4 of them?
No, I tried 2 of them.
Okay.
And my
which 2 have you tried?
The Trail Pass Gold and the hoppier version there.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't think I'm telling any state secrets. It's
well, it's okay.
It's based, well, it may be for you, but it may not be for Sierra Nevada. But this is a yeast-based approach. So it's an alternative organism, yeast, that does not produce alcohol. All I can say is, Doug, thinking back to the alcohol-free beer that we produced, this is stepwise, several stepwise, 10 steps better. So psychologically, Doug, I'm old-fashioned. If I go into a beer store, I'm going to buy a beer, and I expect there to be some alcohol in there. But if you are going to have an alcohol-free beer, these are the types of products that really are worth considering.
I asked Charlie Papazian what he thought about NA beers, and was he going to brew any?
Yeah.
He said, "Why bother?"
Yes, but this Charlie's far more.
They are delicious, and I can't wait to try the other two.
You know what I used to do when I was, I mean, hard to imagine, but I was a sportsman. So I played a lot of football, rugby, football as in real football.
Real football.
And cricket. And, and often wherever I was playing, it was a long way away from home. And, socially, being in the bar afterwards was quite important. And I used to blend an alcohol-free beer with a regular beer and mix them together. And the regular beer took away the worst ravages of the alcohol-free and so on. But of course, now I had a lower 2-3% alcohol product. And so I'm a big fan of that sort of thing in the future. The difference in the UK is that you tax the beer in proportion to the alcoholic strength. So
it's cheaper.
So the lower the alcohol, the cheaper it is.
Wow.
Now that doesn't apply. So in this country, you say, "Hey, here's a 3% product. Here's a 10% product. Give us a break. Which you're going to buy?" So it's an uphill battle when you talk about the lower alcohol products. But I'm a big fan of the lower alcohol type of product.
With your perspective, your long-term perspective, and you've seen so many craft brewers come through UC Davis for training.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to Sam Calagione, and Sam said, "I think the craft beer revolution started when Ken Grossman opened his brewery. When do you think the craft beer revolution began?
I think if you spoke to Ken, he would probably point at the New Albion Brewery in Sonoma.
Yeah.
And Jack McAuliffe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Jack that went off, and he was in the Navy, I think, US Navy, and he found himself in Scotland. He fell in love with the beers there, and he decided he was going to make his own. Don't think Jack had the right business model. But he was the guy who said, hey, you can make yourself a brewery, you can brew beer. So I think it probably started with him. And the other person, of course, was Fritz Maytag, resurrecting the Anchor brand. So some people would argue,
Which was before Jack, right?
oh yeah, Anchor
Yeah.
beer was around for a long time.
Yeah.
And Fritz Maytag used to drink it at a pizza place in San Francisco. And the waiter said to him, you better enjoy that because it's going out of business. So Fritz bought it. So some people would say, well, it was Fritz. But if you think who was the first person to build himself a brewery and to single-mindedly focus on the utmost in quality, then there's no question that it was Ken Grossman.
Well, this is a little bit of a shift here, but having written the book on beer and health, what is the healthiest beers out there?
That's an impossible question to answer.
Well, that's why I ask it.
Well, a lot of people would automatically say Guinness. But those same people would say, and that's because it's loaded with iron. Well, God, I hope not. Because it would be stale as hell. Pretty much all beers have got something going for them.
Yeah.
But if you think about, so in terms of beer, the alcohol cuts down the risk of atherosclerosis. So apart from the alcohol-free beers, they've all got alcohol in them. There's antioxidants in most of them. Silica, which cuts down osteoporosis, that's in the husk. Mm-hmm. So you get more of it in a barley malt-based beer. And apologies to Scott, there'll be less in this beer. The soluble fiber, in all beers, but the more malt you've got in there. So basically, the healthiest beers are the ones that are 100% malted barley and a lot of hops because they contain a lot of antioxidants as well. So I would argue probably, well, yes, or it's pretty near the mark. It's pretty near the mark. But when my wife gave birth to our first child in England in 1980, there was beer in the nursing ward for the new mothers to drink. And it was a stout, but it wasn't Guinness. So
it was the most popular ward in the hospital.
Can you imagine? If I go into Sutter Davis Hospital and say, hey, I got some beer for the mothers? Can you imagine the response?
Well, Charlie, I've got to top this off.
Yeah.
As always, it is just marvelous to see you. And everybody in the audience, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun. We just had a great time here. We've had a delicious World Cup Weizenbach.
Brilliant beer.
The Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, learned all about the history. And of course, from one of the most influential people in the industry, Charlie Bamforth. So cheers, Charlie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks for joining.
Always
Cheers.
nice to be with you. Cheers.